Coordinating disaster response during a natural disaster can be a really challenging endeavor. So we'll get hundreds of volunteers come into a disaster-prone community, as well as tremendous amounts of relief supplies. What do we do with all these supplies? What do we do with the people? How do we coordinate all this? We're going to talk about that this episode of the GeoTrek podcast. On this episode of the GeoTrek podcast, we have an interview with John Eckeberger, Executive Director of the 4B Disaster Response Network. He's a native of the Texas Gulf Coast, and he's seen his share of hurricanes, tropical storms, and flooding during his time living in this part of the country. John, thank you so much for taking time to come on the GeoTrek podcast.
Well, glad to be here.
John, could you tell us a little bit about the mission of the 4B Disaster Response Network? I mean, I know you all are doing great work. Tell us a little bit about this mission.
Yeah, first of all, let me let you know what the 4Bs are. People always ask, is that somebody's name or what? Where do they come from? But the 4Bs in the 4B Disaster Response Network are geographical markers for us. So we think in terms of the Beltway south of Houston down to the beaches of Galveston, and from the east side where the bay is over to the west side with the border of Brazoria County. So within those 4Bs are 600,000 folks. And
wow, it's a lot of population, obviously vulnerable to a variety of hazards in this part of the world.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, hurricanes, tornadoes, tropical storms, just localized flooding. We get it all.
John, I appreciate you sharing that context because, if people aren't familiar with Southeast Texas, if they're not familiar with that area from Galveston up to Houston, you hop on I-45 and you start to see how many people live in this area of the country.
Oh yeah, and it's growing like crazy. I mean, new subdivisions are going in all the time. So, what is that? 600,000 now? They expect in the next 5 years to have added another 100,000 to 150,000 folks. So,
yeah, from what I've heard from the census, it's one of the fastest growing areas of the country. John, tell us a little bit about how you became the executive director of 4B DRN, and could you share a little bit about your professional path? I mean, how did you get into this work?
Yeah. So I've since I was 17, I've worked in churches doing ministry, first student ministry, and then adult ministry and missions and things like that. And I've worked both full time in churches and then also bivocationally, where I would hold down a regular job and then serve in the church. And I was working bivocationally in 2017 when Hurricane Harvey hit our area. I was the missions pastor of a local church. And so it became my responsibility to help coordinate our church's response. And every church that I know of in the area was involved in responding to Hurricane Harvey. It was such a widespread event. Estimated in our area, in the 4B area, 200,000 people were displaced. Now, some were displaced for a few hours, some for days or weeks. We still have vacant homes in this area from Hurricane Harvey in 2017.
And John, for folks like not in the Houston, Galveston area, they're like, I think I heard of Harvey. I mean, this was a tremendous rainstorm. Just what did you see in your area like during and in the days after Harvey? I mean, how much flooding was there just on the landscape?
Yeah, so my understanding is that 53 inches of rain fell within a certain time period, which was just way much more than we could handle. And Harvey was a different hurricane than most for us because it kind of came in, parked over us, and we just it turned into a huge rain event. Instead of being a fast moving storm with winds and that sort of thing, it just parked on top of us. And so the ground was saturated to begin with. The water had no place else to go. And so, homes that had never required flood insurance were flooded. I mean, they when you buy a home in this area, that's always a question that you're asked is there flood insurance required or needed? And for many of the folks that we met after Harvey who had flooded, they had been told you don't need flood insurance. Your home will never flood. And of course, that was a huge mistake. And even my home, which is pretty high level, we didn't flood in our home, but water got up really close and we're at a really high elevation in this area, and we did not have flood insurance. I did get flood insurance just in the weeks following Harvey because I'd been in so many homes that were just devastated, and so we still carry flood insurance today.
John, once you walk into those homes and, this isn't swimming pool, clear aqua water, right? It's muddy, it's dirty, it's contaminated, and it just
Oh, yeah.
destroys everything. I think once you see that, right, you're like, I don't ever want to be
Yeah.
unprotected or not be insured for this moving forward, right?
Exactly. I mean, and in fact, I was in a home in Friendswood, which is in our area, that had 7 feet of water in it. It was so heavy. The water was so heavy that it actually shifted the foundation of this home. This is not a pier and beam home. This is a home built on the ground on a foundation, and it actually shifted it from one corner to the other. We had to get foundation work done on that home before we could begin to rebuild it.
It just shows you the power and the weight of this water to even move things around like it did. I mean, this was just unbelievable. So Harvey hits. I mean, you're living in the area. How did this impact you? And then let's go into the story of you and others getting involved with 4B DRN.
Yeah. So August of 2017, Hurricane Harvey came ashore, and again, it parked over us for several days. Personally, we were okay. We were locked in our house. We couldn't leave the neighborhood. In fact, I saw small cars floating down my street, and so we were kind of confined to our home for about 4 days. But then when we could get out, we could begin to assess the damage. Our local church, which is about 10 miles from my location and on a little bit higher elevation, we served as an emergency shelter for about 250 people for about 2 weeks. It took a while for the water to recede, and then it took a while for us to get homes livable so people could go back into them. But personally, we were fortunate in that our home itself wasn't affected. Everything around us was, and so many people were like we were, confined to their subdivision because the roads were impassable. And so, we discovered early on, just like our church was responding, that there were many, many, many churches and organizations responding to Harvey, including outside groups that came our direction to help. But we began to meet as organized churches to swap resources. Who has water, who has shovels, who's got manpower. And as we began to share those resources and try to get them into the places most needed in our area, probably about our third or fourth meeting in, somebody a whole lot smarter than I am stood up and said, this is great that we're cooperating together in response to Hurricane Harvey, but what about for the next storm? What are we going to do? And, I've grown up here on the Texas Gulf Coast, and it never occurred to me there would be a next storm. I don't know why. I mean, I've lived through a bunch of them, but in that meeting, we determined right then, you know what? We're not going to get caught flat-footed again. We're going to be prepared. We're going to help people be prepared. Individuals, families, churches, businesses, help them be ready because there is an eventual storm on the horizon. And so that started, from that, we determined we would be best served by creating a nonprofit that could kind of lead the charge for these churches and businesses and individuals that wanted to see their neighbors restored. And so we created the 4B Disaster Response Network out of that need. It took us a few months to get all of our legal paperwork done, but the state recognized us fairly quickly. We were able to begin to receive funding, and frankly, in those first, I'd say 5 to 6 months, we received almost $7 million in funding that came to us from foundations, from individuals, from groups all over the country. Hurricane Harvey was big news on the national scale. And so there were people that we had no connection with at all who wanted to help fund the recovery efforts. And so funds began to flow in. I served on the board initially. There were 6 of us on the board initially. And so we began to manage the use of those funds, hire contractors, hire our own construction crew. At one point, we had about 20 full-time men and women on our construction team who were doing nothing but going door to door, cleaning out houses, fixing what was apparent, and trying to get people back into a safe, secure, and sanitary environment where they can begin to make decisions about what their future would look like. And so, with that funding, we were able to for a solid 2 years, put construction teams on the ground. We were in about 1,500 homes in those first 2 years. Some of those were minor projects, some were major projects. We began about 5 months, 6 months into the recovery efforts. We began to realize there were five types of families that were not going to get their homes back unless somebody did something extraordinary on their behalf. And those were senior adults, single parents, widows, those with disabilities, and veterans. Those five types of families were kind of getting left behind as we moved forward in the recovery efforts. Without a double income or without insurance, without maybe family and friends around to help, there were just a lot of folks that were just kind of left hanging, hoping that somehow they could get their lives back together. And so we began to focus on those five types of families early on in 2018. And actually, our goal was to take those families back to a pre-Harvey condition in their home. And for most of them, it was better than pre-Harvey. I mean, we fixed things that needed to be fixed when Harvey hit. And so,
John, this is just, it's just amazing the amount of work you were able to do in such a short amount of time. Like you said, you had staff, you had a lot of people coming together to do this. You and I have talked several times about the success of 4B, and you've always brought it back to really it's coordinating, collaborating, and connecting people. I mean, let's talk a little bit about that. A lot of times in disaster zones, we see volunteers come in, we see relief workers come in, supplies come in, but it's just not it's not really coordinated well. It seems like the work you're doing is really connecting people and coordinating. Why is that so important? And then what did you learn about the value of that in this whole process?
Yeah, I'd say the secret sauce there is the local church. Folks who are involved in houses of faith have a tendency toward being servants, and serving in their community. And so, really, our goal is to tap into those vast resources of volunteers in the local church, who would give up a weekend or give up an afternoon, or some guys took off from work and just worked with us for weeks. We had a number of contractors who kind of set aside their business in order to help people get back into their homes. And so coordinating those volunteers was the key issue. And really, we've done that through our connection with the churches. Every church had somebody in leadership who would coordinate it from their level, and then we would plug them into the overall goals and overall picture of the recovery effort.
Well, that's tremendous, John. You mentioned you had staff, but then it sounded like even from the early days, you had a lot of volunteers. And I know that really continues to the present time, right?
Yeah, we actually have no full-time staff any longer. Since late 2019, we began to move into a little different model in that we have five part-time staff who handle different areas of responsibility. Excuse me. And then the rest of our workforce is made up of strictly volunteers. And of course, occasionally we have to hire contractors to do electrical or plumbing based on city codes and that sort of thing. But 99% of all the work we do is done by volunteers. Some more skilled than others, but all of the volunteers are anxious to learn skills and do the best job they can do. So it's volunteer driven.
Yeah, that's amazing, John. And I know, like, people will go out volunteer on a weekend, or they'll come. We've even had people, I think, travel in from other states to donate time. It's just amazing to see it. And John, a lot of this work from volunteers and from just your different vision through time has really led to this new facility. I know you're excited about it. Could you tell us a little bit about this new facility? I mean, what are the features of it, and how is this going to help 4BDRN respond even more efficiently in the future?
Yeah. Well, thank you for that question because we are excited. We are on the cusp of getting our last permits together and should have occupancy in the next few weeks. But one of the things we discovered in the early days was that there were not enough emergency shelters in the area. Of course, again, our church was being used. Lots of churches and schools were being used as shelters, but there were people who couldn't access shelters, who were living in their cars, who were living in their homes, even though their homes were full of mold and debris. I mean, we just found some horrible situations, especially where children were concerned, just an unsafe environment. And so the Lord provided this facility to us. It belongs to a local church, but it was a family life center gymnatorium facility that they had built in 1975. It had kind of grown into disrepair, different issues, and it was available for us to make use of. And so this kind church in Texas City, New Life Fellowship, allowed us to sign a 50-year lease on this building at $10 a year, and so we have use of this facility for the next 50 years. And when that lease is up, Hal, I'm going to let you renegotiate the next lease, okay? But this facility, besides serving as a warehouse for us, the gymnatorium is our warehouse. We stock materials, we train people there, we send teams out from that location. But there was also part of the building that had been used for classrooms and offices and a kitchen, nursery, that sort of thing. And we've turned that space into an emergency shelter. We can house somewhere between 80 and 100 folks in that shelter, and then we have another 40 blow-up mattresses that we can make use of if we have to. But we took that facility, totally revamped it, had to tear it down to the studs and make it usable because of mold and termite damage and all that sort of thing. But we'll house people as a shelter in those initial days after a weather event. And it'll be a safe, secure environment. We have a kitchen on site that's a commercial kitchen. The space was a residential kitchen. We've enlarged it, basically about tripled its size, and turned it into a commercial kitchen that should be able to provide about 3,000 meals a day. And so we'll feed the shelter residents that are there, and we'll also feed people out the front door. Our goal will be to help feed the community in those first few days after an event when restaurants are not open and maybe there's no electricity or gas available in homes. But we'll do meals, serve them out the front door of the facility. And then once folks have been able to return to their homes, we'll serve as a place for volunteers to stay. We've had over 20,000 volunteers come and work with us since 2017. 40% of those are from outside the area, so they've got to find a place to sleep and eat and recover, that sort of thing after working. And so this facility again will house between 80 and 100 volunteers who come in to help us in the rebuild process. And again, we'll continue to have that kitchen cranking as long as it's needed in the community, and of course to feed those volunteers who have come. As part of this facility is really meant to be a training ground. Our warehouse, we demonstrate to people how to take out sheetrock, how to replace sheetrock, how to hang doors and windows, how to do minor carpentry, minor electrical, and some minor plumbing, so that they can learn right there in our facility be equipped with materials from our facility and sent out all over the 4B area. Geographically, where we're located in Texas City is essentially the center of the 4B area. And so within about 20 minutes, we can be on the island, we can be in the northern part of the 4B area, and east and west. And so the Lord has provided us with a facility that's really in the heart of the service area that we've chosen. And so we're excited to make use of that after the next event. And we're already housing volunteers as they come our direction. They work through our facility and and are sent out into the community.
John, this is amazing. I mean, it seems like a really multifaceted facility where you can house storm evacuees and storm survivors, but then in an initial phase, and then eventually you're housing these volunteers that come in. Like you said, it's equipped with a commercial grade kitchen to feed the people staying there, also to feed the community. And then also when we think of housing folks in Southeast Texas in the summer, obviously generators, air conditioning, showers, all of this. I mean, you guys are very well equipped, right? To just have people stay there for a short to longer term, right?
Yeah, one of the things that if you've ever participated in a church mission trip, some of those can be challenging, and I've been on those trips where there's 50 of you in one shower. That doesn't help things, and you're sleeping on the floor. So our facility has 16 showers on the second floor, which is where the bunk rooms are, and so folks won't have to stand in line to get a shower. And also the bunk beds themselves, instead of having 1 or 2 inch plastic foam mattresses, they have 10-inch Serta mattresses on each of the bunk beds so that folks can sleep comfortably. We think in terms of those folks who've been displaced because of the hurricane. We want them to have as stress-free an environment as possible while they're staying with us. In fact, one of the areas of the upstairs is essentially a medical clinic where we discovered after housing people after Harvey that there were a number of people that were just stressed, and their blood pressure was spiking, and so much pressure to try to figure out what to do with your family and that sort of thing. So we created a little medical clinic area so that folks can come in and get quiet. And we even have a local doctor who runs a emergency clinic here in the area, who has committed to have nurses available 24 hours a day while we're housing people, and so that clinic will be used to give them a chance to kind of calm down, kind of get their head together, and make their stay a little bit more comfortable. So.
Well, John, this is great. I mean, it seems like really you're providing all these different resources that are needed. You could tell you've been through this, you and your colleagues. When you've been through enough of these disasters, you're like, we need showers, we need AC, we need food. And like you said, mental and physical health, resources there. It's all very, very important. John, we're at that point of the podcast where we talk about weathered wisdom. We do this with every guest, where I wanted to ask you, what is an extreme weather event? And you've already shared about Harvey. I don't know how you could beat that, but I wanted to ask you about an extreme weather event that impacted you so much, either professionally or personally, that it left such an impact on your life, you're never going to forget it for the rest of your days. What is that weather event that stands out to you that you even thought, I didn't even know Mother Nature could do this, and here we are.
Yeah, in the early 90s, a tornado came through the Channelview area of Houston, and I was serving in a church on the east side of Houston in those days, and actually had my 2 sons and 2 friends of theirs from our church. We were all at Rice Stadium to watch the Naval Academy play Rice, and we had to pause the game midway because the storms were brewing over Houston, and they didn't know how dangerous it was going to be, and they finally called the game, and we got in our van and headed toward Channelview and to take these boys home that were our guests, and the closer we got, the worse it was. And so we stopped. This is the day before the days of cell phones, and so we stopped at my house, which was a little east of Channelview, a little west of Channelview, and tried to reach the mother of these two boys. Well, we couldn't get through. That's when we realized the Channel View had really taken a direct hit. So I left the kids at home, headed that direction, and I had never seen up close what a tornado could do. It was remarkable. I mean, in a horrible way. And climbing up on the roof of this home, the two boys that were our guests that got to their home found their mom. She survived the tornado by diving. She went into her garage, dove underneath her car, and the tornado took the garage. So she was okay, and about half the house was gone as well. And so up on top of her roof, trying to put tarps, on what was left of her house, and looking across at this path of destruction. Uh, I'd never seen anything like that, and seeing people, getting back in there, getting out of their homes, and just standing there trying to figure out, well, what is the next step. Um, yeah,
Yeah, John.
it's
I mean, tremendous story. I mean, when you see the human impact of that too, and like you said earlier in the podcast, Southeast Texas, we have hurricanes. Tornadoes are a different animal. They're very surgical. Most people untouched, but if your neighborhood gets hit by a tornado, it can just shred everything. It sounds like to this day, it's still a very impactful memory for you, and I'm thankful that his mom was okay. You hear these amazing survival stories, and you say, "Wow, by the grace of God, it could have been worse, but people survived." Yeah, John, thank you for sharing that. Again, this part of the country, tornadoes, hurricanes, we've had some extreme winter weather in recent years. We get it all. And it's just something that we have to learn to deal with. Thank you, John, for sharing that story. I mean, that we have heard of these stories of epic tornado outbreaks, even in Southeast Texas. John, I wanted to get back to talking about 4B, this work you're doing, coordinating and collaborating with others. Recently, when I met with you, you were talking about this exciting initiative to have churches serve as evacuation centers, almost in a coordinated network spread out in the area. Could you share a little bit about that? What's the vision with that?
Yeah, our goal really is for every community in the 4B area to have a faith-based emergency shelter evacuation site, and so we've already connected with several churches in the area who want us to come in and help them. Our goal will be to make sure that they've got ADA compliant restrooms, that they've got larger kitchens, maybe not on a commercial scale, but at least larger to handle larger crowds. That they've got showers. We've met with several churches who, when you look at their existing facility, the place where showers are going to go in are going to be the baptistry. If you're familiar with churches that have baptistries, well, that's where the plumbing is, and so that's where showers will go in for some of these churches. And our goal really is that every community would have some place they know they could turn to if they needed to evacuate, if they needed to spend 2 or 3 nights away from their home while the weather settles. And so, again, we've got several churches already lined up that have asked for assistance. Our goal would really be to have a network of shelters around the area, so that if someone in Lamarck needs shelter, we'd have a dozen or so options for them that they could get to.
John, I wanted to ask, is this more post-storm, or could this be even you're an elderly person, you live in the flood zone, you're told to evacuate, and you can't drive to Dallas, so you have a local option now? Could it even be during the storm?
All right. Yeah, especially, and one of the things that we've realized locally is that the city plans, the county plans really are more about evacuation. Let's get you out of the area if at all possible. But for some people, that's not going to be an option, or it's going to be a difficult option. And so we'd love to have someplace in their local community where they know they can go and they'd be safe and secure in that location. And of course, some of these churches are going to be at higher elevations than others. Some won't be usable because of the elevation that they're at. But I'm thinking of a particular church on the island that is up on stilts. and so they can handle some flooding, and so they certainly will be an evacuation point, emergency shelter, and we'd love for people to know those exist prior to the need,
Yeah,
so that
John,
they.
I'll tell you this concept will save lives. I've talked to so many disaster victims that said, elderly people or disabled people that said, I don't drive on interstates ever, let alone an evacuation. Or I don't, my grandma's with us. I don't think she can make a 7-hour evacuation trip. So we're not going to do it. It sounds like you're giving them an option in their community that all of a sudden, they say, well, we can do a 10 or 15-minute drive, but we can't
Mhm.
sit in gridlock all the way up to Dallas kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And we saw that after the hurricanes, a dozen years ago, where folks got stuck on the road, and it turned out to be disastrous for many of them. And so having someplace local that they're aware of, and they're being served by their neighbors. It's their neighbors who have opened up this shelter, and it's their neighbors who are welcoming them in. I mean, that's an ideal situation. That's one of the things we want to see happen in the 4B area.
John, so network of churches set up as evacuation centers. You have this facility that can feed tremendous amount of people, house both evacuees and volunteers. And then you've talked a lot about coordinating volunteers from the faith-based community during and after a disaster. I mean, these are tremendous things that are going to have a huge impact. They already have had an impact on thousands of people in our area. So if people are listening to this podcast from other disaster-prone regions, maybe the Alabama coast or coastal New Jersey or the tornado belt in the Midwest, and they say, we want to do what they're doing in Southeast Texas with 4B DRN. I mean, what is your advice? What are those first steps that people can take to do some of the things you're doing right here in Southeast Texas?
Yeah, yeah, and again, the key there is just cooperation, and so much can be accomplished if individual churches or individual businesses or individuals can kind of set aside their own particular goals and cooperate with one another to see a greater goal met. And that's what we've experienced here is that a number of churches and businesses have basically said, look, we're going to band together because we're stronger together, rather than all these silo responses to a disaster. We're gonna have a unified response so that we can have a greater impact. And really, that's what it's going to come down to is a group. It can be a small group. I mean, it could be 5 or 6 churches, or five or six individuals or businesses who say, look, let's pool our resources. Like this facility that we have in Texas City, the cost to us is nothing. I mean, $10 a year is our lease, and so it was available to us. There are hundreds of facilities like this all over the area that have been abandoned or just not in use, or minor small amounts of use that could be used as an emergency shelter, evacuation site, that sort of thing. And it just comes down to cooperation. Can you set aside, and in the church, I'd say we tend to compete from time to time, whose church is bigger and whose church is doing this and that. But frankly, the churches in the 4B area have kind of set aside those petty differences, whether it's the manner in which we worship, or even doctrinal differences, and said, look, for the greater good of people in this area and for the glory of God, we're gonna serve together. We're going to set aside denominational differences, and we're going to cooperate as the body of Christ in order to serve the people who live in this area.
John, what a
That's all it comes
tremendous
down to.
model. I mean, I just think like that's really what it should be like, right? I mean, coming together, putting aside our own agendas to say, how can we as a collective group, a faith-based community, have a bigger impact?
Yeah, right. And imagine, I mean, again, the secret sauce to me is the number of volunteers that come from houses of faith. We have this. If you're a person of faith, you have this inner drive to serve, and so we've just tapped into that. We would encourage anybody that faces these types of disasters in their area to consider how you could set aside some basic differences and band together and do something similar. It doesn't have to look like what our facility looks like, but the Lord will open up doors and give you a sense of what it needs to look like in your area. If I think if you'll start the process, and we certainly would serve as resources for anybody that's got questions about how we got started and what we've been doing.
Yeah, thank you, John, for sharing your testimony, your vision of 4B DRN. Again, a vision that could really be replicated in other disaster-prone communities to help thousands of people that are impacted by these disasters. John, if people are hearing this online and they're saying, "Hey, how can I find out about 4B DRN? How can I find them online or on social media? How could I be involved as a volunteer or to give a charitable donation?" How can people find you guys, and how can they get involved with you?
Sure. Our website is the best way to get in touch with us. It's www. The number 4, the letter B, response.org. So 4bresponse.org. Any information you need, contact information will be there. You'll hear about new programs that we're doing. We're really excited about a program that we've just launched called the Resiliency Program. I don't know if I have time to tell you about that, but we believe that if we could help some of these older homes in our area become more resilient, more weatherized, doors and windows that close well, maybe some minor repairs to siding or soffit or roofs, that sort of thing. If we can help them be more resilient now, when the next weather event comes through, the damage won't be as severe. And so we've launched this program. We've worked in 2 or 3 homes already. We've got another dozen or so that are on the calendar for the next few weeks. And that's a program. I'll have to say this is funded by the Moody Foundation here in Galveston County, and they've been very generous to us, and they're funding materials for those homes, and we're providing the labor.
Yeah.
To
And
make those
John, what I
homes more
love about
resilient.
that is you're not just sitting flat footed waiting for the next storm to come. You're actually getting out, being proactive, going home to home, making them more weather resistant. So when the next storm hits, they have a better chance of survival. John, I
Yeah.
wish we could go on longer. We're at about time, but this has really been an inspirational interaction and conversation for me. I know our listeners are going to love this. And like you said before, it's just a matter of time until that next storm hits Southeast Texas. But a lot of folks are going to be better prepared. They're going to have some options for evacuation and a coordinated effort for volunteer work and for donations through 4BDRN. John, as we wrap up the podcast, I wanted to ask you, with everything we talked about today, what is one last take-home message you'd like to share with our listeners?
That's a great question. I would say it's about cooperation. If we can set aside our own agendas, there's no limit to what can be accomplished for the good of our community, right? And that's one of the things we've experienced here, and the attitude of it's gone beyond the disaster response thing. It's created an atmosphere, I believe, in many of our local churches that we're in this thing together. We want to impact our culture, our communities in a positive way, regardless of what house of worship we find ourselves in. And I would encourage people think in those terms. How can we, as the body of Christ, impact our community on a greater scale? Because it can be done. I would leave you with this as well. One of our goals of our church is that we want to saturate, and that's not a pun, but we want to saturate the 4B area with the gospel by restoring people, families, and churches, and the 4B DRN fits right into that. That we're seeing that happen in restoring families, individuals, and churches, and so it's a bigger vision than just in our single congregation, but it's sort of a God-sized vision, and I would encourage people to think in those terms.
Yeah, John, thank you so much. Very holistic approach. Inspirational work that you're doing. And like you said, it's all about the coordination and coming together to collaborate with others in the faith-based community so everybody wins in the end. John, thank you so much for taking time to share your wisdom and experiences with our audience. I know a lot of folks are going to love this podcast and hopefully apply the lessons you shared to make their communities more resilient. Thank you so much, John.
Amen. Praise the Lord.
John, thank you again for joining us on the podcast. You shared so much wisdom with us. Really, the one major take-home point I'm getting from this conversation is the importance of coordination, of bringing together people. In this case, you talked about the faith-based community, coordinating efforts, coordinating response, having a network of churches and faith-based leaders that are involved. I know, John, you and I have talked personally about this, and I said, I can't believe all the success coming to 4B DRN, and you've shared with me, it's not rocket science, it's getting out ahead of these disasters and coordinating efforts, building those relationships before the disaster hits. There's really nothing else I think we can say. I think that's really the main point of this conversation. I think it's going to be very impactful and inspirational for our listeners who live in disaster-prone areas who say, hey, we could model that same example right where we live by getting out ahead of this, coordinating efforts, and getting ahead of natural disasters before they hit. Again, everyone, thank you so much for tuning in to the GeoTrek podcast. Thanks to your support. We're one of the top podcasts on the topic of natural disasters. Really appreciate your support, listening to our podcast, following us online, and engaging with us. We love to hear from you. So reach out, share your questions with us, your thoughts on this podcast. We always love hearing from you. Again, my name is Hurricane Hal Needham. I'm the host of the GeoTrek podcast, and we'll catch you on the next episode of the GeoTrek podcast.